Hi everyone, it's Abby with the Bead Place and beadplace.net, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create a necklace or a bracelet or both from our Wild Whatever necklace kit that was featured in the Softlex Company Customer Appreciation Week. You can find kits at beadplace.net, and make sure to head on over to the Softlex Company VIB Studio Facebook group to join and see all the other Customer Appreciation Week presentations. Let's get started. All right, so the first thing that we're gonna do is take the tail end of our Softlex, and we are going to gently untwist the end of our friendship bracelet. Now you can see that this has a backwards twist ply done to it where it's kind of wanting to twist on itself. So as long as you can get part of it open so that you can get a clear pass through the middle here, that's fine. Because once you pull it, it'll pop right into the end. So what we're gonna do is we are going to pull our Softlex through until we are at the very middle of our Softlex. So the ends of our Softlex should be even. So we've got our tail ends even, and we're just gonna make sure that we are even down in the middle, which we are. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to start the knotting. And how we're gonna do that is we're gonna have a right hand thread and a left hand thread. And so we are going to start a square knot. So we're gonna take the right side and we're gonna place it over the friendship bracelet. Then we are going to take the left side and it's gonna come over the tail end of the right side behind the friendship bracelet, and then it's gonna come up through this loop that we've made originally. And then we're gonna wanna tighten it. So I'm gonna separate my ends out and I'm going to pull this knot up. Just like that. So the first one's gonna feel a little bit awkward, and that's okay because we still have a little bit of wiggle room up here at the top. But once we get going, it'll be a lot easier to figure out. So we're gonna make this first knot pretty small. We don't wanna pull it so tight that we lose this cool bump out. So we want it pretty small. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the left side of our Softlex and we're going to bring it over the front of our friendship bracelet. We're gonna take the right side, bring it over the tail end of our Softlex from the left, behind the friendship bracelet, and up through that loop. So before I tighten this, I'm gonna give you guys a good look at it so you can see where everything should be going. And then we're gonna tighten it. So as we tighten, we're gonna wanna kind of transition the slack a little bit and make sure that it's kind of being placed where we want it to be placed. So we can pull some of the slack from the top knot into that next knot that we just did, but we still want it to be fairly loose so that we can see those bump outs. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to add a cute little tiara cast faceted bead. This time I'm stringing it on my right side, and I'm gonna show you guys how we can just kind of push it up where it needs to go. So I've just strung it on the right side, and I'm just gonna kind of push it through that loop over the friendship bracelet core, and then kind of pop it right into place there. like that. So now we are going to do another square knot. You can see how on the right side here, we have my bump out that's on top. That means I'm back to my right side. So this top bump out is always going to tell us which side needs to start the knot formation. So I'm on my right. I'm going to bring it over the friendship bracelet. I'm going to bring my tail end on my left side over the tail end that came from the right. I'm going to bring it behind the friendship bracelet and then up through that little bump out that I made. And I'm going to pull it tight. So if we start and stop, what's going to happen is the slack is going to kind of get transferred to places where we might not necessarily want it to be. So these first few wraps that we make, these first few knots that we make, we'll kind of have to go back in and adjust the tension. And that's just fine. That's kind of just what we'll know that we have to do. So now what we're going to do is we are going to, again, string one of those beautiful tier cast beads onto the right. There we go. And now our bump out is on the left, so that means we've got left starting, our right coming over and under and through. And then we are going to tighten it down. And as we tighten, you want to make sure to keep pulling on the friendship bracelet to keep that straight and not squiggling throughout. And so you can see that we have a faceted bead, a blank knot, and then a faceted bead on the other side of the next knot. So what we're going to do is add a bead every other knot and also on every other side. So I'm back to my right side. I've made my bump out. I'm going to bring my left side tail over the right side tail behind the friendship bracelet core and then up through that bump out from the back to the front. Just like that. And remember, we'll have to kind of keep placing these in an even spacing. But what's cool about these friendship bracelets is because it's a cord, it kind of wants to grab in and set where it'll need to go. And then it'll also reveal some of those fun colors on the inside, so we'll get more pops of color. All right, so remember, if you need to go back in and adjust the sizing, that's okay, but I like a little bit of size variation with these knots. I think it just kind of adds to the whimsical look of this bracelet or necklace, however you want to wear it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a bead to the left side. But let's say we really kind of get in the flow of things and you're nodding along and you forget to add a bead at one step. No worries, you can always go back in and add it to the opposite side. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So again, to know which side you're on, look for the bump out. So this bump out is on top, this bump out is on bottom. So since this bump out is on top, I know that I'm on my left side. So I'm going to take my left side, I'm going to bring this out and across the top to create the next bump out. I'm going to bring my right side across the top of my left side tail end and behind the friendship bracelet core, and then up through the left side bump out that we're creating. All right, so that of course places that bump out on the bottom. Let's tighten and get everything where it needs to be. can situate. And now I'll show you how to add that bead in essentially where we have intentionally forgotten it. So we can see we've got a bead here. Here's the knot that we skip, and now we need to add a bead here. So in order to do that, in order to get the bead over onto this side, we're gonna take our right side, which used to be our left side. We're gonna add a bead in and pass it over just like we did before to get the beads started. All right, so this is what we've got. And we're just gonna keep working like that. You can hold it however it's comfortable for you. I like to hold it in my hands because I feel like I have a little bit more control over it that way. You could use a macrame board, you could use a clipboard. Sometimes people will tie it onto something, or use a binder clip, a clothespin. Like I said, whatever is comfortable for you. But me personally, I like to do this knotting in my hands. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna knot until we have covered almost the entire friendship bracelet. And then we're gonna come back and use the tail end of that friendship bracelet to create a beautiful little tassel pendant or charm, however you wanna wear it. This is one of those fun projects where you can wear it as a bracelet or a necklace. So we've gotten our skipped knot, and now we're gonna need to put a bead onto this side. So I'm gonna string my bead on and pop it in. So whatever's more comfortable for you, you can either string your bead on as you're making the knot or add it in after the fact. Sometimes I think it's fun to kind of pop the bead into place, but I usually do a mixture of both techniques, just depending on how much attention I'm paying to what I'm doing. So I like the freedom that this loose weave can give you. So we'll keep knotting like this, back and forth, and then we'll show you how to create this fun tassel. All right, so now that we have knotted all the way almost to the very end of the bracelet, we're gonna stop. We're gonna stop right when we get to this knot right here. And we're gonna leave these tail ends because we're gonna turn those into tassels. So you can see I've finished my last knot. You might use all of the faceted beads, you might not, just depending on your tension, but my last loop does not have a bead in it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to undo this last half of the knot so that I have both of my wires facing down. So they're now in the same direction. So it still looks like I've got part of a knot here, but I'm able to kind of pinch these two together so that these can come back up and this can be worn as a necklace with a center point. So now at this point, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab one of my crimp beads and I'm gonna string the crimp bead on both of the wires. And that crimp bead is gonna be in, or the wires are gonna be going through the same direction within the crimp bead. They're not gonna be opposing each other. They're going through in that same direction. And so I'm going to kind of cinch this crimp bead up as close as I can while still giving it a little bit of a natural kind of feel of movement. I want a little bit of loopage in there. You can kind of adjust it so that you have matched the tension and still you're giving yourself enough room to crimp. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our crimp tool. Now I'm using the magical crimp forming tool. You can use that if you have it, or a standard crimper works just fine. But basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna crimp by putting that bead right in the middle of that kind of balled out section on the crimp tool. And then we're gonna rotate and crimp, rotate and crimp, rotate and crimp. So we're just working all the way around and crimping until it is secure. And once it's secure, what we have is a perfectly round little bead. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we are going to start stringing. So we have this fun fiesta of beads here. We have a great mixture of trade glass, trade style glass, vintage seed beads, modern glass, Austrian pearls, just a fun variety of beads here. And basically all we're gonna do is just make sure that we're starting with a small bead on both strands. And the only reason why we're doing that is just so that it starts to kind of, oh, let's make sure that they're different. It starts to kind of build up naturally, and it'll have room to sit side by side. But if you see a little bit of the wire here, that's no big deal at all. Because remember, we've got this beautiful brass wire throughout the rest of the bracelet. So having that wire showing is not a big deal. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna string. Okay, so I have strung my beads until I have about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches on my shortest piece of wire. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna consolidate our strands into one strand, just to kind of make things a little bit more fun and interesting. Now, this is not necessary, but I like to do it, so we're gonna do it. What I'm gonna do first is I am going to take a crimp bead and I'm going to string it on both of those strands, just like we did before. And we wanna pull a fair amount of the slack out. Give yourself a little bit of wiggle room for these beads to move around. But you don't want a big section of the wire showing, because that would just be silly. Unless that's what you want to do, and in that case, be silly. So this is what we've got. Now we're gonna crimp just like we did before. And we're crimping both of those strands together. And like I said, if you've got a standard crimper and you want to use that, go for it. This is just what I've got and what I'm using and what I prefer. Okay, so we've crimped, we've got a ball. We're gonna take our shortest strand and we are going to cut it off, just leaving a slight little tail end. And now we're going to pick a bead that has a big enough hole that our tail end can just kind of hide right next to it. So now we're gonna string any of our remaining beads. You should have a few left. If not, no worries. You can choose a bead from your own stash or do your own thing. This project is called Wild Whatever because you can just kind of do whatever with it. All right, so now that we have consolidated our strands into one, what we're gonna do is we are gonna attach the ring side of our clasp. So we're gonna take our last crimp bead and we are going to string it on. We're gonna string the ring side of our toggle through, and we are gonna bring the wire back down through the crimp. And so I find that when you kind of consolidate your two wires back to one, it can kind of make some double-stranded designs look a little bit more intentional and a little bit more finished and polished. It can also do the opposite depending on the design. So it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of have to figure out what works best for your project. Okay, so we've pulled the slack out and we're going to crimp. With this particular project, our goal or our thought was kind of like maximalism, to have a lot going on. And so having this tapered down just adds more interest. But again, not entirely necessary. All right, so we're gonna trim the tail end off just long enough that we can tuck it into that last bead and just kind of work that little bit of a tail end down so it can fall inside. Okay, so now we have a pretty cool mixture of textures that we have going on, and now we're going to figure out what we need to do to clasp it. So of course we need to have a toggle attached to this end, but we also need to have a project that fits us. So what you need to do now is you need to figure out if you are going to wear this as a bracelet, and if so, how you're going to wear it as a bracelet. I like to wear it as a wraparound bracelet, kind of like what we show here. And in that case, what you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to wrap it around your wrist and see how much of this chain we'll need to make it fit. So I'm gonna do that and we'll move on. You can see on this sample, we designed it as both a necklace and a bracelet. So on one side, we have the toggle and then the chain and the tree charm, which counterbalances the toggle to make it somewhat symmetrical, balanced at least. And then the labyrinth charm is added down in the front to kind of add more visual interest to where we've created the tassel. And then of course it doubles as a wraparound bracelet as well. So the length of the chain is really going to just vary depending on your wrist size, if you're wanting it as a bracelet, or the length of the total finished necklace if you're wanting it as a necklace. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is attach our chain to the end of our macrame piece here. And so in order to do that, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with a jump ring. Your kit comes with several jump rings. We're gonna start with a jump ring and we're gonna open it. Sometimes they like to hook together in the kit bags. So we're gonna open it. Now, anytime we're opening and closing a jump ring, we wanna make sure that we're opening it in this direction, like this, and not pulling it open to the side. That way when we go in to close it, it becomes a perfect circle again. Now, what I like to do is I like to hook through the friendship bracelet loop. Sometimes if it's too tight, you can just hook through the soft flex. Just do what comes easy to you. Today, I think just so you guys don't have to watch me struggle, I'm just gonna hook through the soft flex. And before I close that jump ring, I'm gonna put in the end link of the chain. And then we'll close it. Always remember to check the top of your jump ring to make sure that it's closed all the way and even. All right, so now what we'll do is we will either trim your chain, or if you want it to be the full length, you can of course have it be the full length. But then we're going to take the other jump ring, or one of the other jump rings, and we are going to attach the bar side of the toggle to the other end of the chain. What's cool about using jump rings to finish things off like this is if you make it and you decide that it's not a great fit, you can just adjust where the jump ring is on the chain in order to make it bigger or smaller, and then make your final cut of the chain. So at this point, we have something that functions as a necklace or a bracelet, but we need to zhuzh it up a little bit, because at this point, I mean, we've got a lot going on, but it still looks a little bit plain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the front of the necklace. So right here, you can see we've got this empty space, and what we're gonna need to do is fill that empty space by adding a charm. I like to put the labyrinth, and I like to think of this design as like a journey around the world, because there's parts and pieces and techniques from all around. And so the symbolism of that labyrinth, I think, is perfect for the front of this necklace. So we're placing that right over that empty space right there. And don't worry, we're gonna come back to these ends here to turn this into a tassel. Now, you have received a tree in your kit. If you've purchased a kit, you can decide to put that tree on the front of your necklace or bracelet, or you can use it to kind of counterbalance the back if your toggle is off to the side. It's totally up to you, but this is your journey. This is your necklace, so you place that tree wherever you want. For me, I'm gonna put it kind of off to the side in the back. It's not exactly a mirror of the other side where the toggle is, but I'm just going to choose a spot and add it in just to add some interest to the back of the necklace. So I'm just using my last jump ring to attach that there, and it'll dangle off. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna come back to the front, and we're gonna turn this into a tassel. Now, this is cute on its own, but we can make it even fluffier, like this. So how we're gonna do that is we're going to pull each individual thread out, and we're gonna untwist it. So we're gonna twist it the opposite side of its ply. Now you can do tweezers to do this, or you can just use your fingers. It's up to you, but we're just gonna untwist and then separate those threads so that they can't really twist back together as easily. You can use a scrap piece of wire, you can use a safety pin, but I'm using my fingers right now just so you guys can see what's happening here. So I've separated this into 3 different plies, or 3 different cords. We're gonna do the same to all of them, and then we'll come back in and we'll fluff it up even more. All right, so now that we have untwisted all of the strings on our long stringy tassel, what we're going to do is cut it down to size. We didn't want to cut it down to size first, because what can happen when we're deplying or unplying is you can get some tangles. And if those tangles are too bad, they can turn into knots. And it's always better to have the knot on something that you can cut off rather than at the top where we're retaining that thread. So now that we have everything unplied, what we're gonna do is figure out how long you want your tassel, and then we're just gonna go in and cut straight across. Now, you wanna use sharp scissors or a knot cutter. Do as I say and not what I do. Don't use the scissors that were just sitting there with the office supplies, because you'll have to go in and correct your cuts. So we have this. Now you might be thinking, that tassel is a little flimsy. It doesn't look like the other one that you showed first. Well, that's because we're not done. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go in, now that they're shorter, we can go in and individually separate these threads. And now that they're shorter, they're a lot easier to separate. So like I said before, you can use a tweezers or a pick, a piece of scrap wire to do this. I just like using my hands to do it because I feel I have a little bit more control, but you do what you want to do to get it to look how you want it to look. And if you like the stringy tassel look, by all means, you can leave it stringy. So we're just gonna separate this, and then after all of these have been separated and fluffed and frizzed, you'll go back in for one final trim, and then you have a finished wild whatever necklace or bracelet, however you want to wear it.